Fight Breakdown, the 12-Year Walk. Fight Breakdown, the 12-Year Walk, the Mandana debate established Shankara by his early 20s as the foremost living philosopher of the Vedic tradition. The most articulate Mimamsaka of the previous generation was now his disciple. The ground had been won. The question was what to do with it. What Shankara did with it is the subject of this final fight breakdown. Between approximately the year 810 and the year 822 of the Common Era, roughly 12 years, Shankara walked across the Indian subcontinent 4 times, founded 4 monasteries at the cardinal directions, installed 4 principal disciples to lead them, produced the textual corpus that would govern the Vedanta tradition for the next 1200 years, conducted approximately a dozen further major debates against opposing schools, and died at Kedarnath at the age of approximately 32. The career, considered as a single integrated strategic action, is the most compressed multi-game performance in the Indian intellectual tradition, and one of the most compressed in any tradition for which we have records. This is the longest of the fights we slow down. The earlier breakdowns followed single encounters at high resolution: the cave at Omkareshwar, the courtyard at Mahishi, the road at Varanasi. This breakdown follows a career. The unit is 12 years, not 8 days or 4 minutes. The moves are institutional and textual, not conversational. The opponent is not a single person, but a structural condition. The absence, in early 9th century India, of a coherent institutional infrastructure for the Advaita Vedanta teaching. The fight is the installation of that infrastructure. The decisive move is the design. We will study the design. The setting in approximately the year 810, the intellectual landscape of the Indian subcontinent looked broadly as follows. Buddhism, which had dominated North Indian intellectual life for over a millennium, was in slow decline. The great monastic universities, Nalanda, Vikramashila, Odantapuri, were still operating, with thousands of students and substantial royal patronage, but the intellectual confidence of the tradition was eroding. The various Buddhist schools, Madhyamaka, Yogacara, the philosophical heirs of Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, were producing technically sophisticated work, but the tradition's relationship to the wider Hindu society had become strained. Within 2 centuries, Buddhism would be largely extinct in India, outside the eastern coastal regions and a few isolated pockets. Brahminical orthodoxy was fragmented. The Mimamsa school dominated the household Brahmin establishment in North India and was the institutional center of Vedic ritual life. Its post-Mandana successors had largely accepted the limited Advaita corrections we covered in Fight Breakdown 2, but had not produced any institutional integration with the Advaita tradition. The Sankhya and Yoga schools had textual traditions of high quality, but no significant institutional presence outside specific regional centers. The various Vaishnava and Shaiva traditions had popular religious followings, but limited philosophical organization. The great philosophical theist traditions, the Proto-Vishishtadvaita, that would later be systematized by Ramanuja, the Shaiva Siddhanta of the South, were in pre-formal stages. The Kapalikas and other tantric ascetic groups, drawing on a range of esoteric and antinomian practices, were active in various regions. Some of them were locally powerful, with significant followings and at times royal protection, but they had no organized philosophical defense of their positions and were primarily ritualistic and ascetic rather than dialectical. Charvaka materialism, the Indian school that denied the existence of the soul, the afterlife, and any non-sensory source of knowledge, persisted as a minor intellectual presence, useful as an opponent in formal disputations because the school was articulate about its position, but not a major institutional player. What was missing in this landscape was an institutional structure For the Advaita Vedanta tradition Shankara had inherited from Govinda Bhagavad-pada and was now positioned to extend. The teaching had textual roots in the Upanishads and the Brahma Sutras. It had a small lineage of teachers stretching back through Govinda to Gaudapada and beyond. It had, after Mandana's conversion, the most accomplished Mimamsa scholar of the generation as one of its exponents. It had, in Shankara himself, a uniquely capable practitioner. It did not have monasteries, regional centers, doctrinal authorities, or geographic distribution. It existed as a teaching held by a few. It did not exist as an institutional fact. The geographic conditions of early 9th century India permitted, with great effort, integrated subcontinental movement. There were trade routes, pilgrimage circuits, road networks of varying quality, and the sustained political stability of several regional kingdoms. A determined traveler, on foot or with intermittent transport, could move from Kerala in the south to the Himalayas in the north, from Gujarat in the west to Bengal in the east, in weeks or months. The traveling was hard but feasible. Several of Shankara's contemporaries undertook similar journeys. What was distinctive about Shankara's journeys was their integration into a single strategic project. The opponent in this fight is not a person. It is the structural condition of the Advaita teaching. The teaching was a teaching, not yet an institution. Without institutional embedding, the teaching could not survive its current generation in the form Shankara had produced. With institutional embedding, the teaching could survive any number of generations. The institutions would carry it forward whether or not any individual practitioner was present. The fight, in this sense, is between Shankara and time. Time was going to take the current cohort of practitioners, Shankara himself, Sureshvara, the other emerging disciples, within decades. Whatever institutional structure was going to carry the teaching past the current cohort had to be designed and installed before time made the design impossible. The tighter constraint, in Shankara's case, turned out to be the duration of his own life, which the traditional accounts give as ending at 32. He had something less than 15 active years to design and install the structure. Whether he knew his lifespan in advance is unknown. The traditional accounts say he did, by virtue of advanced perception, and decided to compress the work into the available time. Whether or not the foreknowledge is accepted as historical, the compression is observable. The fight against this structural opponent is a different kind of fight from the conversational fights we have studied. It does not consist of moves in a debate. It consists of decisions about institutional design, geographic placement, disciple training, textual production, and the integration of all of these into a system that would continue to operate after the designer's death. The moves we have catalogued in parts II and III remain in the inventory. Shankara conducted many further debates during the 12-year walk and used the moves we have studied, but the dominant question of the period is not which conversational move to use in any particular debate. The dominant question is what kind of institutional structure to build, where to place it, and who to lead it. The pre-fight, by the time Shankara left Mahishi after the Mandana debate, his available resources were considerable. Sureshvara, the converted Mandana, was now a senior disciple. He brought with him the entire intellectual capital of the Mimamsa establishment, the textual mastery, the ritual expertise, the regional reputation, converted to the service of the Advaita position. The other principal disciples were emerging from various encounters in the years following the Mandana victory. Padmapadacharya, who would prove the most philosophically rigorous; Hastamalakacharya, who would prove the most poetically gifted; Totakacharya, who would prove the most ascetically disciplined. The royal patronage available to Shankara was significant. Several of the regional kingdoms, particularly in the south, where the Chera, Chola and Pandya lineages had long-standing patronage of Vedic institutions, were prepared to provide land grants and material support for monastic foundations. The pattern of royal patronage of religious institutions was well established. Shankara was working within an existing institutional category when he sought royal support for the foundation of monastic centers. The textual work was already underway. The Brahma Sutra Bhashya, the commentary on the Brahma Sutras that we have seen as the textbook of the defense cascade, was being composed. The commentaries on the principal Upanishads were in progress. The Bhagavad Gita commentary was in early stages. The hymns and shorter philosophical works were being produced as the encounters of the period demanded. The pre-fight position, in summary, was strong. Shankara had reputation, disciples, royal connections, and a textual program. The remaining question was the design of the institutional structure that would integrate all of these into a system that would survive him. The opening, Sringeri, the first monastery, was founded at Sringeri, on the Western Ghats in what is now the state of Karnataka, in approximately the year 810 of the Common Era. The location was selected with care. Sringeri is in the south, on the river Tunga, in a region that had long-standing Vedic learning but no integrated Advaita center. It was geographically distant from the Mimamsa institutional dominance of North India. The Advaita tradition could establish itself in the south without immediate competition from the converted but still locally powerful Mimamsa institutions. The local political authority, the Chera kingdom, was prepared to provide land and protection. The riverbank location was traditionally auspicious for monastic foundation. Shankara installed Sureshvara as the first head of Sringeri. The choice was made on multiple grounds. Sureshvara had the textual depth required to establish the doctrinal authority of the new institution. He had the regional reputation, inherited from his Mimamsa career, that would attract serious students. He was, in all likelihood, the senior disciple in age and seniority at this point. The installation was a costly signal. Shankara was placing his most accomplished disciple in the southern monastery, signaling that the institution was not a junior or peripheral foundation, but the first of the principal centers. The doctrinal assignment of Sringeri was the Yajur Veda. The four-Veda assignment of the four monasteries that Shankara was about to design was a deliberate piece of structural engineering. Each monastery would be the doctrinal authority for one of the four Vedas. The integration would be that the Advaita tradition, considered as a whole, would speak with four distinct voices, each authoritative for its assigned Veda, but the four voices would be coordinated through their shared adherence to the Advaita teaching. The structure permitted regional and textual specialization without doctrinal fragmentation. Sringeri continues to operate today, 1,200 years after its founding. The current head is the 36th in the unbroken line of pontiffs, the Shankaracharyas, descending from Sureshvara. The institution is one of the most continuously functioning intellectual institutions in human history. Whatever else can be said about Shankara's institutional design, the Sringeri Foundation is sufficient to demonstrate that the design's durability was not an accident. The engagement, Dwarka, Puri, Jayatirmath. Following the Sringeri Foundation, Shankara walked west to the coast of Gujarat, where he founded the second monastery at Dwarka, a city of significant traditional importance, associated with the Krishna stories of the Mahabharata on the Arabian Sea coast. The doctrinal assignment of Dwarka was the Sama Veda. The principal disciple installed was Hasthamalakacharya, the most poetically gifted of the four, appropriate for the Sama Veda, which is the Veda of chant and musical recitation. Shankara then walked east to the coast of Odisha, where he founded the third monastery at Puri, another city of significant traditional importance, associated with the Jagannath temple complex on the Bay of Bengal. The doctrinal assignment of Puri was the Rig Veda. The principal disciple installed was Padmapadacharya, the most philosophically rigorous, appropriate for the Rig Veda, the oldest and most metaphysically dense of the four collections. Shankara finally walked north to the Himalayan foothills, where he founded the fourth monastery at Jayatirmath, sometimes written Jayatishpitha, in what is now the state of Uttarakhand, near the headwaters of the Ganges. The doctrinal assignment of Jayatirmath was the Atharva Veda. The principal disciple installed was Totakacharya, the most ascetically disciplined, appropriate for the Atharva Veda's associations with the magico-ritual traditions, and for the Himalayan environment that demanded sustained physical austerity. The four-monastery design exhibits multiple kinds of structural intelligence simultaneously. It is geographically integrated. The four cardinal directions of the subcontinent are covered, with each monastery within travel distance of the major populations of its region. It is textually integrated. The four Vedas are each assigned an institutional authority, with the assignment matched to the institutional environment and the leading disciple's strengths. It is institutionally integrated. The four mathas are constructed on the same monastic model, with parallel governance structures, parallel succession arrangements, and parallel relationships to royal patronage. It is doctrinally coordinated. All four are committed to the Advaita teaching, with the Brahma Sutra Bhashya as the shared philosophical foundation and the various Upanishad commentaries as the shared interpretive resources. The design also exhibits redundancy. Four monasteries means that the loss of any one of them to political disruption, to a particular regional invasion, to internal failure of leadership, does not compromise the system. The other three continue. The teaching is not located in a single place that can be destroyed. The design exhibits, finally, the principle of successor builders we have seen. Each monastery has a head with full authority for his region. Each head is responsible for training his own succession. The institutional design does not depend on Shankara's continued personal involvement. It operates by its own dynamics, with Shankara having stepped out of the operational role at the moment of installation. The monasteries were operational by approximately 815 to 818, depending on the dating used. They have continued to operate, with periods of disruption and reconstitution, for the 1200 years since. The textual corpus in parallel with the monastic foundations, Shankara produced the textual corpus that would govern the tradition. The Brahma Sutra Bhashya, the commentary on the Brahma Sutras, is the principal philosophical work. It runs to approximately 1,000 pages in modern printed form. It is structured throughout as the defense cascade we have seen. Each sutra is followed by a Purvapaksha statement of opposing positions, a refutation of the Purvapaksha, and a restabilization around the doctrinal teaching. The work is, by any reasonable assessment, the most sustained dialectical text in the Indian classical tradition. The commentaries on the 10 principal Upanishads, Isha, Kena, Katha, Prashna, Mundaka, Mandakya, Aiteya, Taittiriya, Chandogya, Brihadaranyaka, establish the textual authority of the Advaita reading of the Upanishadic literature. Each commentary is a substantial work in its own right. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashya alone runs to several hundred pages. The commentaries are the standard reference points of the Advaita tradition. Subsequent interpretations are evaluated against them. The Bhagavad Gita commentary establishes the Advaita reading of the most popularly read of all Indian philosophical texts. The Gita, by virtue of its appearance in the Mahabharata, was accessible to a much wider audience than the Upanishads or the Brahma Sutras. The commentary therefore extended the Advaita teaching's reach beyond the formal philosophical community to the broader devotional public. The hymns and shorter works, the Saundarya Lahari, the Shivananda Lahari, the Bhaja Govindam, the various stotras to specific deities, the philosophical compendia like the Vivekachudamani and the Atmabodha. The attribution of the latter group is disputed by some scholars. Extend the corpus into devotional, mystical, and pedagogical territory. The hymns are still recited in homes and temples across India. They have been the entry point to the Advaita tradition for generations of practitioners who would never read the formal philosophical works. The corpus, taken together, establishes the Advaita teaching at every level of the audience pyramid. The formal philosophers, the Brahma Sutra Bhashya; the textually serious students, the Upanishad commentaries; the broader educated public, the Gita commentary; the devotional public, the hymns and stotras. The integration of textual levels is itself a piece of strategic engineering. The doctrine reaches everyone who is reachable in the form they can receive. The decisive move. The decisive move in the 12-year walk is not any single foundation, debate, or text. It is the integration of all of them into a system whose components reinforce one another and whose continued operation does not depend on the designer. The 4 monasteries reinforce one another by geographic redundancy and textual specialization. The 4 disciples reinforce one another by personality complementarity, philosophical rigor, poetic gift, textual mastery, ascetic discipline, and by shared training. The textual corpus reinforces the monasteries by providing the doctrinal authority each monastery would propagate. The monasteries reinforce the textual corpus by training the successors who would copy, comment on, and transmit the texts. Royal patronage reinforces the institutional structure by providing the material conditions for its continuity. The continuity reinforces the patronage by establishing the institutions as durable enough to be worth patronizing. The integration is the shelling move at the largest scale we have seen. Once the system was in place, no individual choice, including Shankara's own, could easily reverse it. The institutions had momentum. The disciples were trained. The texts existed in copies distributed across the centers. The patronage was committed. The doctrinal positions were public. Shankara had hardened his commitment to the Advaita teaching past the point of any personal recall. The teaching was now embodied in structures that would carry it forward whether or not Shankara continued to act on its behalf. The career, considered as a multi-game design, was complete by approximately 818 to 820. The remaining 4 years of Shankara's life were the closing moves. Aftermath. Kedarnath. The traditional accounts of Shankara's death place it at Kedarnath, a Shaiva pilgrimage site in the Garhwal Himalaya, at an altitude of approximately 3,500 meters. Kedarnath is one of the 4 sites of the Char Dham pilgrimage, the 4-site circuit that, perhaps not coincidentally, traces a structure parallel to the 4 monasteries Shankara had founded across the cardinal directions of the subcontinent. The accounts differ on the specific manner of death. Some say Shankara entered a cave at Kedarnath and merged with Shiva. Some say he simply died of natural causes in the harsh Himalayan environment. Some give other details. The accounts agree that he was approximately 32 years old, that the place of death was Kedarnath, and that there was no transfer of authority to a single successor, because the institutional structure he had designed did not require a single successor. It required 4 heads at 4 monasteries, each with their own succession, and that structure was already operational. The choice of Kedarnath is itself a final move in the multi-game. Kedarnath is at the geographic center of the 4-monastery design, considered 3-dimensionally. It is approximately equidistant in great circle terms from Sringeri, Dwarka, Puri, and Jayatirmath. It is also at the highest altitude of any site associated with Shankara's career, in a Himalayan environment that requires the highest level of ascetic preparation to survive even briefly. The death site is the geographic and aesthetic apex of the integrated system. The closing move is consistent with the design. The modern parallel, Gandhi 1893–1948, the contemporary parallel that has, more than perhaps any other, exhibited the structure of the integrated multi-game career on a comparable subcontinental scale, was the career of Mohandas K. Gandhi from his arrival in South Africa in 1893 to his assassination in Delhi in January 1948. Gandhi's career, taken as a single integrated strategic action across approximately 55 years, exhibits each of the elements we have studied. Reputational capital was built across decades of public costly signaling, the South African Satyagraha campaigns of 1906–1914, the return to India in 1915, and the slow regional work of building the Congress as a mass movement, the Salt March of 1930, the multiple imprisonments, the periodic fasts. By the time of independence in 1947, the reputational capital was sufficient to make Gandhi the de facto moral authority of the Indian independence movement, with influence exceeding his formal political role. The public record was built through prolific writing. Hind Swaraj, 1909, the autobiography, serialized 1925–1929, and published in book form. The journals Indian Opinion, Young India, and Harijan, and tens of thousands of letters. The path dependencies created by the public record bound Gandhi to positions, nonviolence, communal harmony, the constructive program, that he could not subsequently revise without significant cost to his standing. Institutional embedding was achieved through the ashrams, Phoenix Settlement in South Africa, Sabarmati and Sevagram in India, the constructive program organizations, cadre production, Harijan welfare, rural sanitation, basic education, and the influence on the Congress Party's organizational structure. Several of these institutions continued operating after Gandhi's death. Some are still operating today. Successor builders included Vinoba Bhave, the post-independence land redistribution movement, Jawaharlal Nehru, the political continuation of the independence movement into governance, Vallabhbhai Patel, the institutional integration of the princely states, and a wider network of Gandhian workers across India. The successors carried specific portions of the Gandhi project forward, with their own emphases and disagreements, but with the basic Gandhian commitments preserved. Self-binding commitments were made repeatedly across the career: non-violence, the spinning wheel as personal practice, communal harmony, voluntary poverty, and were hardened past the point of reversal by their public visibility and their connection to the reputational capital. The assassination in 1948 was, in a final structural sense, made possible by the depth of the binding. Gandhi could not have stepped back from his commitments to communal harmony at the time of the partition, because the commitments had become identical with his public identity. The assassination was the cost of the binding. The parallel to Shankara is structurally precise. Both careers integrate institutional embedding, textual production, successor building, geographic distribution, and self-binding commitments into a single multi-decade strategic action. Both careers culminate in deaths that do not disrupt the institutional structures they have built. Both careers have continued to act through their institutional successors for periods exceeding the life of the original practitioner. The compression differs: Shankara's 20 years, Gandhi's 55, but the structural elements are the same.